It's 1:30. The inquiry is resumed. Mr. Chung, would you like to commence your evidence in chief, please?
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. So it's Dr. Simpson next, ma'am. He's in situ, so I'll begin. You are Dr. Dan Simpson, is that correct?
That's correct.
By way of qualifications, you have a first degree in animal science from Nottingham University and a research doctorate, PhD, University of Bristol, 20 years of professional experience in ecological consultancy. You're a chartered ecologist, a full member of the Chartered Institute of Ecology and Environmental Management, and you're the technical director of Aspect Ecology, working with a team of over 40 full-time ecologists. Is all that correct?
That's all correct.
And then in paragraph 1.2, you set out your experience of carrying out ecological surveys in with regard to a whole host of different development types, but and species, flora, fauna, etc. But then in 1.3 in particular, I think of relevance to us here, you're regularly employed to advise on potential impact and development proposals on sensitive habitats and species and designated sites, including sites of local, national, international importance, and to formulate mitigation strategies and to advise on ecological enhancement opportunities. Is all of that correct?
It is, yes.
And are you familiar with the site? Have you done everything you need to do to know about the site and its surroundings?
Yes, so I'm familiar with the site, having been involved with the initial ecology work at application stage, and also having visited site by way of updates throughout the determination period.
Wonderful. So what I want to do in chief, Dr. Simpson, is just pick up some of the key points and point the inspector to the relevant parts of your evidence, and then allow Mr. Hall an opportunity to ask you about the only matter which is in dispute between parties at this inquiry, which is the contribution towards mitigation of impacts on the triple SI. So first of all, you've submitted a proof of evidence and a rebuttal. That's correct, isn't it?
That's correct.
So I want to focus on Thurfield Heath triple SI for the most part, but if we take MPPF paragraph 193 as our starting point, if you bring that up, as you no doubt aware, 193A deals with harm to biodiversity generally. Yeah.
Yes.
So what's the test that a decision maker needs to be satisfied about, or what is the process that a decision maker needs to follow before they can grant planning permission in accordance with 193A?
So effectively, the test is one of whether there is significant harm to biodiversity or not, and whether that harm can be avoided, mitigated, or compensated. If there's significant harm that cannot be avoided, mitigated, or compensated, then that provides a refusal reason for planning permission.
Wonderful. And then 193B focuses specifically on triple SIs, which is what we're it's not the only ecological matter that we're interested in at this inquiry, but it's one of the key ones. So that concentrates particularly on triple SIs. And what does that say? Does that set up a different test?
So different test, different wording. In essence, what that paragraph says is that development will not normally be permitted within or outside a site of special scientific interest where there's likely to be an adverse effect on it, either individually or in combination with other developments. And then there's an exception to that, which refers to benefits outweighing harm.
Right. So likely to have an adverse effect is a lower bar, isn't it, than significant harm, isn't it? So with a triple SI, you don't have to show significant harm, just likely adverse effect is enough.
Correct.
To trigger a potential refusal reason.
Correct.
Yeah. And as far as the exception is concerned, it's no part of your case here, is it, that we're into the exception or the exception applies and we pass the exception? You say we don't have to go that far because once you've had regard to the mitigation, there would be no likely adverse effect. Have I understood that position correctly?
Yes, that's right. In the context of para 193B, where it refers to development, it's talking about development and any associated mitigation. And my view here is that with the mitigation in place, there would be no tangible adverse effect on the triple SI, Thurfield Heath triple SI.
Right. So we'll deal with the two matters separately and then come back to that in a bit more detail. So first of all, if we deal with 193A, the significant effects on biodiversity generally, if I can put it that way, rather than the triple SI, I think it's your proof of evidence section 8. Can you just tell the inspector what is being done to ensure that there will be no significant effects on biodiversity generally, and explain whether the local planning authorities, ecology advisors, agree with your assessment?
Yes, so the application has been informed by an ecological appraisal, which in turn was based on desktop and field survey work to understand whether there are any irreplaceable habitats, designated sites, protected species, and so on that may be affected by the proposal. That is all documented in the 2021 ecological appraisal, CD 1.15. And in essence, that demonstrates and concludes that there would be, subject to the relevant avoidance, mitigation, and compensation measures set out in that document, no significant harm to biodiversity in general, and that covers habitats and species.
Thank you. And then in section 6 of your evidence, you turn specifically, this is PDF 20 of the electronic proof of evidence, you turn specifically to the mitigation that's proposed to ensure no likely adverse effect on the triple SI. Can you just briefly, I think Mr. Hall was particularly interested in whether there was enough detail about what's going to happen. We'll come to the contribution element in a moment. But in terms of what's going to happen on site, the site being the development site, not the triple SI, whether there's enough detail. So in the mitigation strategy, which is in your appendices, as a mitigation strategy in terms of detail, is that, in your experience, a sufficient amount of detail to be putting together at the outline stage?
At outline stage, yes, it contains sufficient information. It's not a document that's intended to set out every last detail of the mitigation, for example, detailed landscape planting and yearly management prescriptions for habitats that are being created within the development site. Landscaping is a reserved matter in that context, and that level of detail would come at reserved matter stage if this application was approved. But for the current stage of planning, outline stage, it sets out the quantum of proposed green infrastructure and open space. It sets out the landscape and habitat typologies of the different parts of the SANG, and it sets out broad heads of terms of management of the different habitat types. And it also sets out a commitment that those habitats would be managed in perpetuity.
Yeah. Are you proposing here to the inspector that questions about what the level of harm is likely to be, what the impact will be, and how it can be mitigated, are you asking the inspector to leave all this for reserved matters, or is that work already been done?
So in terms of the assessment of harm and of impacts on the triple SI, that is already relatively well understood in general terms, and obviously the background to that is set out within the Thurfield Heath mitigation strategy. In terms of a specific assessment of the likely effects of the appeal proposals on the triple SI, that's set out in chapter 5 of my proof of evidence, and as can be seen from that, it's the impacts are focused on recreational effects, and as much as it's possible to do so, I've tried to quantify that effect within my evidence.
And how does this position, the position you've outlined, differ from the position in those cases that Mr. Hall took us to, where the inspector said, "Well, I can't possibly condition this. I can't leave this to a matter to be decided later"?
So in the appeal decisions cited in the Conservator's evidence, there were fundamental deficiencies in the either the assessment of impacts or the baseline information, which would ordinarily be required to make a reasonable assessment of impacts, particularly in the Kaimanta decision. There was a lack of evidence upon which the inspector felt it was not possible to assess effects and therefore to design an appropriate mitigation strategy. So this situation for this appeal materially differs as the effects are well documented and reasonably well understood, and therefore that has informed the mitigation strategy that's been formulated.
Now, I think I can lead on this because Mr. Hall agreed this when I asked him questions. It's agreed that the mitigation strategy, which is now in front of this inquiry as part of your appendices, was sent to Natural England, and they had a look at it, and they are happy for this to be conditioned, secured by a condition. In making that decision, that they're happy for it to be secured by a condition, would they be aware of that, the type of case law that Mr. Hall brings to our attention? Would they be aware that they need to know what the impacts are and that they are capable of being mitigated? This is a decision that needs to be made now.
Yes, indeed, they would be aware of such appeal decisions, and as a statutory nature conservation organisation, they have a statutory role in scrutinising environmental evidence and ensuring that it's sufficiently robust to inform decision making and formulation of mitigation strategies.
Yeah. And are you and Natural England and the local planning authority satisfied that if this mitigation strategy is put into place by condition and then enforced, that there will be no likely adverse effect on the SSSI?
So the appeal proposals and the associated mitigation responds directly to the mitigation objective set out within the mitigation strategy. And that includes provision of substantial on-site green infrastructure, or SANG. It includes improved east-west recreational connectivity, facilitating active travel and greater linking up of the public rights of way, diverting residents away from the SSSI. And finally, there's a financial contribution toward mitigation within the SSSI itself. Taken together, those measures form a comprehensive and proportionate package, as I say, directly responding to the mitigation strategy. And therefore, my view is that there's a clear basis for concluding that the appeal proposals would not give rise to adverse effect on the SSSI interest features.
Yeah. Now, at the application stage, when this was considered by the local planning authority, whose role was it to decide whether the £350 per dwelling met the SIL tests?
So that would fall to the local authority.
Yeah. And what was the position of the officers in terms of that £350 as opposed to the £1,000 per dwelling that the Conservators were asking for?
So that was discussed in the officers' report, and in summary, the view expressed by officers was that the Conservators' proposed contribution, which was based on a case study set out in the mitigation strategy, would effectively be disproportionate to be applied to this appeal site, particularly having regard to the quantum of open space being provided and the effectiveness of that in absorbing recreational activity. And therefore, an alternative contribution was proposed by the local authority and agreed with the appellant, and that's a contribution of £350 per dwelling. And the local authority set out that it considered all of the planning obligations within the officer's report to meet the relevant statutory SIL test and also the policy tests within MPPF.
And how would you describe the position of Natural England on that £350? Have they said, yes, we agree with that? Have they said, no, we disagree with that? Or have they said, look, that is a matter purely for the local planning authority and the decision maker?
So in essence, Natural England, the contribution doesn't go to Natural England directly, and they have not therefore commented on whether it's an acceptable sum of money. They have said it is purely for the local authority to determine. However, as a statutory body with a statutory role in safeguarding triple SIs, had that contribution not been of an acceptable level, I would have expected that to have formed an objection from Natural England, which is not the case here.
Right. Now, what we heard was from Mr. Hall was I asked him whether they actually had a function under under the act under which they were appointed. Do they have a function of managing the Triple SI, sort of a general management function? I was left unclear about the answer, but if they do have a general management function, a statutory duty to manage the Triple SI, would they have a duty to use the money that's given to them in pursuance of this mitigation strategy?
Well, I think the mitigation strategy makes clear that the Conservators play an important role in implementing mitigation measures in terms of avoiding or mitigating potential recreational harm to the Triple SI. So I think it's plain that there is a function there that the Conservators fulfil, and clearly that if that contribution was to be made available, my expectation is that the Conservators would be obliged to use that money and implement the measures in agreement with discussions with Natural England as to exactly how that money's spent.
Let's assume that's not the correct analysis, and that the correct analysis, as Mr. Hall appeared to allude, was that they have no statutory function at all to manage the heath generally, or to manage the heath to ensure that there's no recreational pressures on the heath. That this is something that they do purely voluntarily. If they say, well, we used to volunteer to do this, but we're not going to volunteer anymore, or unfortunately, by the time this scheme comes along, Mr. Hall indicated it may be that sadly that they're not around. What would happen then in terms of that £350? Could it still be used to mitigate the impacts?
It could still be used. It would just be a different entity that would be implementing the measures, and whether that would be Natural England intervening in a regulatory capacity to see that money spent on the Triple SI, or whether it would be the local authority themselves funding works within the Triple SI, or potentially outside of the Triple SI, and that is also a possibility. There's a number of schemes outside of the Triple SI that are identified in the mitigation strategy, such as providing alternative open space, leisure and recreational facilities elsewhere within the zones of influence that can be effective in mitigating recreational pressure from new development, improvement of existing facilities, and so on. So the money could potentially be spent on some of those measures, but that's ultimately would be a decision for the local authority.
Yeah. Now the £350 is in the unilateral undertaking because we can't pay sums of money through conditions. In terms of the on-site works, there's a condition, condition 24, prior to the submission of any reserved matters application, a landscape and ecological management plan should be submitted to approved in writing by the local planning authority. And then it says the sort of things it should include, and then those are listed, and then it has to, the plan, once it's been agreed, has to be carried out. There's no specific reference to the recreation mitigation strategy itself that you've got in your appendices in the condition. What's the relationship between the LEMP that's going to be submitted and approved and then implemented and the recreation mitigation strategies? Is that going to be part of the LEMP?
So the I think originally it was envisaged that the recreation mitigation strategy would itself be conditioned, and that was indeed a draft condition set out in the officer's report. However, as since the appeal was lodged, and with the elevation of the SSSI as a main issue for consideration, we've prepared the recreation mitigation strategy for Natural England's consideration. That has now been accepted by Natural England, and I suppose the missing piece of the puzzle really is the final details, and those are things that I touched on earlier in terms of landscape details and detailed management prescriptions, where dog bins are going to be positioned, and signs and so on and so forth, materiality of signage. All of those are details that would come forward at reserve matter stage, and which could be or would be part of the LEMP condition that's being proposed.
Right. Well, we can visit that at the condition session to see whether we want to keep condition 24 as it is, or now that we have a mitigation strategy which we agreed, whether we want to condition that mitigation strategy specifically. That can be a matter of a roundtable discussion in due course.
If it helps, it may simply be that there needs to be a cross-reference to the approved recreation mitigation strategy within the LEMP condition to tie the two together, and that's how I'd envisage. And from my experience, I've seen that set out in condition wording before, something to the effect of the LEMP will be prepared in accordance with the principles established within the recreational mitigation strategy, and that would provide a link there between the two documents.
Wonderful. I think, broadly speaking, that's the outline of the appellant's position on these matters, Ma'am. So I'll leave it there, and I'll allow Mr. Hall to ask his questions.
Good afternoon, Dr. Simpson.
Afternoon.
I really did appreciate reading your proof of evidence and your rebuttal, and I think there's a lot that we do agree on that I hadn't managed to agree in statement of common ground with the appellant team. So I thought I would like, if you don't mind, to run through some of those things so that we can try and get that understanding between us. I think we agree, for example, that the visitor survey informs us that 50% of SSSI visits come from the inner zone of influence, and 75% come from the wider zone. You're nodding?
Yes. Yeah, agreed.
Thank you.
That's set out in the mitigation strategy,
Yeah.
And references back to the visitor study.
I think we agree that the visitor survey was before COVID, and that the mitigation strategy recognises that visitor patterns may have changed at that point of time and may have changed permanently.
I see reference to that in the mitigation strategy, but what I haven't seen is any quantification, if you will,
absolutely.
of any such change. And so I don't have any evidence upon which to accept the premise that there has actually been a physical change in visitor numbers.
We've had two pandemics the Conservatives have seen through, and both of them had big impacts on our common. I think we agree, and I think it's, that the Natural England's consultation response is a conditional no objection.
It's a no objection from Natural England, and it's an agreement to the proposed mitigation subject to additional measures being secured by condition and legal obligation.
Yeah, I'll live with that. I think we agree that Natural England are the party that has said that the development has the potential to damage and even destroy features of the Triple SI.
Agreed. It does say that in, it says that in its original consultation response on the application.
I'd like to draw your attention to the proof of evidence of Mrs. Else. Mrs. Else states it is recognised that Natural England's response to the application establishes the requirement of the appeal development to provide an appropriate financial contribution towards the on-site management of Fairfield Heath Triple SI. Do you agree that that's what Mrs. Else says?
I don't have evidence in front of me, but
It's
that,
DD 824. Sorry, that's where Mrs. Else says she's referring to. It's Mrs.
That's
Else's
Natural
proof of
England.
evidence. It's at 7.1.15.
I can't find Miss Else's evidence, but I think I understand the point you make. And if it's a reference to the Natural England consultation response of the 3rd of September 2025, then that does refer to securing financial contributions in accordance with the mitigation strategy.
No, I'm really, we keep drifting. Is it your view that what's being asked for is on Triple SI mitigation, or
Yes.
just
Yes,
or
it
just
is.
mitigation in general? Or it can be anywhere.
No, I think Natural England's position is clear on that, and it's set out in its latest consultation response, which is in my proof appendices DS4 consultation response 13th of April 26, which is the comments in response to the submitted recreation mitigation strategy. And it's in the concluding section of that letter when Natural England refers to the need to secure financial contributions towards on-site measures within the Heath.
So the SIL declaration needs to reflect that not be able to divert money from where the appellant and the conservators agree it needs to be spent.
Well, the response from Natural England says that it is for agreement with the local planning authority. The mitigation is to be directed towards projects secured through an appropriate planning mechanism in agreement with the local planning authority.
Yeah.
But plainly the contribution must fund measures which directly reduce recreational pressure on the Triple SI.
Yeah. And do we agree that because of the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981, and particularly the duty in 28G, that is the inspector's duty, do we agree that that means the inspector needs to know if the mitigation you are committing to is appropriate?
So the duty on the planning inspector under section 28G is to take reasonable steps consistent with the proper exercise of the authority's function, in this case, making a decision on the appeal application to further the conservation and enhancement of the features for which the site is of special scientific interest. And
And
The test really, I suppose, there is the MPPF test, which we looked at earlier under para 193, whether there would be an adverse effect on the SSI interest features, and whether any potential adverse effect would be appropriately mitigated.
yeah, I think we're agreeing. I think we're agreeing because the inspector needs to know if the mitigation that is being committed to is at a sufficient level to actually achieve no adverse effect, is effectively what you're saying. It needs to further the features, the conservation of the features of the SSI.
Yes, I think I agree with that. The inspector needs to be satisfied that the mitigation will be effective in mitigating the potential adverse effect.
I'd like to turn you to map 11 in the the mitigation strategy. So I believe that's in where do we find it? Yeah.
Page 29.
You're ahead of me.
The mitigation strategy, CD 5.5.
Map 11 is the map I'm looking for, and it's on page 29 of 81. Are we there?
Yeah.
My question, Dr. Simpson, is can you describe what this map is actually showing?
So it purports to show draft and partly complete or partly allocated development sites, and also permitted development sites. And I think it's a visual representation of the table immediately beneath it.
Yeah.
Within the wider zone of influence of Furfield Heath SSI, which is the 5.8 kilometre zone of influence.
Brilliant. We're agreed. When you look at this map, does it include development opportunities, plans, whatever these blobs are, within the inner zone of influence?
Yes, it appears to, yes.
Okay.
The inner zone's not shown, but I think you can infer that looking at the plan.
So this term, the wider zone of influence, contains two zones, the inner zone and the outer zone.
I'm not sure I agree with that. I think the wider zone is 1.9 to 5.8 kilometers. The inner zone is 0 to 1.8 kilometers.
This map is titled within the wider ZOI, and it includes an area which is shaded that includes both the inner and the outer ZOIs. I'm going to ask again, do you understand that there are three terms at play in this document? Wider, which includes both, and then inner and outer ZOIs.
No, I don't think I do understand that. And I don't think I see reference to outer zone within this document. And it is somewhat confusing wording, but I only see reference to an inner 1.9 kilometer zone and a wider 5.8 kilometer zone.
I'm going to come back to that point. Okay, so as far as you're concerned, there are two terms, inner and wider. And you agree that this map on page 11, includes the inner.
Yes, and maybe the legend in the key should be adjusted because it's potentially misleading.
Yeah, but it does include developments in the inner zone.
It is showing
in the wider.
It is showing.
Yeah.
Draft and actual allocated and permitted sites within the inner zone. It's just that
so they are concluded within the wider zone, includes the inner zone.
On the map, it does.
Good, thank you.
But the inner zone is not shown on this.
It's not shown separately.
Map.
That's because the wider zone includes the inner zone.
That's where I would disagree with you, in terms of that could be inferred from this map.
Yeah,
but the text of the mitigation strategy infers does not infer that that's the case. The text refers to two zones, and it doesn't suggest.
So the table below, what does this table include? Does it include all of those dots?
I presume it does. They're not labelled on the map itself. But there are 7 dots and there are 7 sites, so I'd assume so.
Thank you. This is very important that we understand, and this is why I asked you at the beginning about the 75 and the 50, and understanding what's meant when the text refers to a number of houses being built within the wider zone, and whether that wider zone includes the inner zone. And I think this map can only be interpreted in one way, which is that the inner zone developments are included in the wider zone.
As I say, that's not my interpretation looking at the text.
So would you like to tell us more about that text?
So it might be useful. I think probably the point you're driving at, and do correct me if I'm wrong, but this will feed into the way in which the financial contribution has been calculated in the illustrative tariff exercise that I've set out in my proof of evidence. And it's para 6.4.16 perhaps, which is the most relevant, because that refers to the housing trajectory within those different zones that we've just been talking about. That paragraph draws on the mitigation strategy that we've just been looking at.
No, it's in that document.
6.4.16 of my proof of evidence, Mark.
Oh, okay.
And that in turn refers back to para 112 of the mitigation strategy.
Oh yeah, we'll come to that in a minute. Yeah, I've read your proof of evidence.
And in essence, the figures that I've drawn in terms of the housing numbers comes from the mitigation strategy, from 2 different locations. Effectively, it's para 112, which refers to 1,800 homes.
I really didn't want to get into this just yet.
Okay.
We will get into it.
I'm sure we'll come back to it.
But what I was really looking for was an understanding between us that map 11 indicates that the wider zone includes developments across the whole piece of the shaded area, whether they be in the town of Royston or whether they be in the village of Ashwell.
I can certainly agree with that. What I disagree with is that means that one zone includes the other in terms of the housing trajectory, which is what we'll
we'll come to
on
that.
to.
We'll come to that. Okay, that's fine. But this map defines the wider zone, and it clearly has developments that are in the inner zone in it, and it has them in the outer zone too, or the wider the outer zone. Brilliant. I'd like to ask you about a map within your proof of evidence. Yes, your proof of evidence, which is a map you've put in at 412, which you seem to suggest is a map of Thurfield Heath, Triple SI, and LNR. And I wondered if you could explain that map.
Yes, so the figure 4.1 in my proof, this shows the boundary of the Triple SI, which is the dark green hatch going left to right, and then there's a overlapping hatching for the local nature reserve. And that covers the primary grassland areas of the Triple SI, but you can see it also expands out to include certain woodland areas as well. Unfortunately, it's not particularly clear to see the difference between the Triple SI and the LNR.
Yeah, and that's really where I was coming from, because neither are correct.
Well, I mean, as it says on that figure, this mapping has come directly from the Magic Mapping, which is the DEFRA and Natural England managed website. So if there's an inaccuracy in that, that's a matter for DEFRA and Natural England.
I just kind of felt that this map it adds very little to your statement of case. It seems to have just been put there just to not show what's really going on. The mitigation strategy has a comprehensive map of the Triple SI, and there's clearly a sculpted piece, which is a rugby pitch, which has been sculpted out of it, and the local nature reserve on Magic is just not correct. In my proof of evidence, sorry, in my statement of case, at a document which is CTHG 0105, I include the original document, which is the declaration of the LNR in 1973 by Herts County Council. And that includes a map signed by the deputy clerk to the county council, which is effectively the official map. And when you've got somebody providing good and verifiable evidence of that sort, I don't understand why you're trying to put doubt by publishing a map that's wrong in comparison.
That certainly wasn't the intention. It was merely a figure to show the location and the boundary of the Triple SI, to give context to the text. You'll see it simply appears in the context of the general description of the Triple SI. It's very much introductory preamble, describing the interest features and the location, and it's merely a visual aid. I quote the sources there as to where that mapping has come from. If it's in any way incorrect, then, as I say, that is a matter for the source provider. I haven't sought to draw any arguments based on the mapping that's shown there. As I say, it's purely for illustrative purposes. So I don't accept your point that it's intended to be in any way misleading or As I say, it's simply there for illustrative purposes to help the reader see where in the world the SSI is. I don't make any points in my evidence about the boundaries of either the SSI or the LNR. It's simply a statement of this is from effectively the National Register of SSI and LNR sites that I've drawn the information from.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Our questions, please, not to make any unnecessary accusations.
Okay. I'd like to now talk to you about east-west connections between the rights of way at footpath Royston 09 and the bridleway Royston 10.
Okay.
I'm referring to the master plan document. I think it's a V20. So this is CD. Oh, I can't translate these things. 2.2, CD 2.2.
CD 2.2. Yeah.
Yeah. This is the document which contained most of the maps that the public got to see during the consultation process, and text that talks to the input, if you like, to the recreation mitigation strategy document that you've worked on since. I'd like to turn to page 12 of this document. And it talks about movement and sustainable connections. And I'm not going to head down the rabbit hole of sustainability. I'm going to keep to movement. Paragraph 2 says there are currently 2 public rights of way that traverse the site in a north-south direction. Route 10, which I think we all know is the Bridleway, the Hertfordshire Way, which follows the tree belt, and Route 16 that is located in the site's eastern parcel. It says a further public right of way, Route 9, which is footpath 9, more commonly referred to as the Green Walk, leads from the A10 London Road to the west of the site before passing the site's northwest corner. I want to know, does this right of way enter the site?
I'm seeing nods from Miss Else there. It's not a matter I can actually.
You're not allowed.
I can't actually comment. I'm not a witness dealing with rights of way. So,
but you are. You're a witness dealing with Sang, and Sang is about. Sorry. I'm going to turn you to your proof of evidence on page 22, where you include the map, figure 6.1, from the Thurfield Heath SSI mitigation strategy, where it lays out the desirable connection between Royston 9 and Bridleway Royston 10. So, Dr. Simpson, I need to understand from you how this connection begins at Royston 9. And one of the ways it can begin is because Royston 9 can actually be part of the land controlled by by the development. Or in the alternative, it could be land controlled by someone else.
Someone may correct me if I'm wrong, but I understood the Greenwalk Plantation was controlled by Royston Town Council. From my recollection from site visits, I think the footpath comes right up to the red line boundary of the application site. As I say, I'm not privy to the precise legal boundary in relation to the public right of way.
Yeah, that's great. So let's now go to a map, because that might help as well. So I'm back in the master planning document, and I'm scrolling down, and I get to a map on page 17. And I'm looking at this map, and I can see the red line boundary of the site, and I can see the blob of the green walk plantation that comes out of it. But to the northern side of the red line boundary, I can see a purple line, which I understand is supposed to be, although it's not there in the key, but it is supposed to be the footpath 09.
Okay.
Would you agree that's outside the red line of the development?
The red line seems to include the purple line on this plan.
Oh, sorry. This is page 17 on the, which is on the document, which is page 19 on the PDF. Sorry, I may have. Yeah.
Page 19 on the PDF.
Yeah, 17 is the
17 on the actual page.
document itself. Sorry, my PDF reader doesn't.
So I'm looking at the northwest corner of
yeah, that's line. Right. I see a purple line and then a red line.
I mean, it looks to me as though the purple line sits within the red line on that drawing, but then it passes outside it as you go to the west.
Yeah, I'm talking about the west. You're
Right.
seeing the green walk plantation.
Yes.
Is where it's inside.
Yes.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
That, as you say, I think we can agree, is certainly understood to be owned, or owned by Royston Town Council. The question I'm asking is about whether 9 actually ever enters the parcel of land controlled by by yourselves.
I don't know the answer to that.
No, fair enough. But the map, you would agree, shows it outside it.
It looks to be outside it,
Yeah,
but it may be an artifact of the way it's drawn, because you've got the red line and the purple.
Shall we go back to the
next to
written
each other.
text, and let's read the written text again? So this was a constraint on page 12, which is going to be 14 on the PDF reader. And we're in paragraph 2, and it says, a further public right-of-way, Route 9, more commonly referred to as the Green Walk, leads from the A10 London Road to the west of the site before passing the site's northwest corner. These public rights-of-way currently provide pedestrian access, etc. But it doesn't say it comes in, does it?
Not from what you've just read there.
No. Okay, that's great. The reason I'm asking is because your SANG provision makes a great deal about connecting or complying with the desire from within the Fairfield mitigation strategy in figure 6.1 to connect Green Walk Plantation Footpath 9 to Hertfordshire Bridle Way, Royston 10. And you're intending to do that. Is that correct?
Yes, that's part of the strategy.
Yeah. I'm going to help you now. In this document set, there's a map that shows some plans for routes within the site. Let me just find it again. There it is. It's on page 25 of the document, which is going to be 27 of the PDF. This is a page titled Access and Movement. And what we see is a map. And somebody has written in their wisdom, or drawn in their wisdom, a public right-of-way between two arrows that comes from, sorry, it's proposed right-of-way is what it's called on the key. And it's a right-of-way that runs from the northwest corner of the controlled land across to Bridleway 10. Can you see that?
Is this the green arrow you're referring
The
to?
green arrow, yes.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that the plan to propose and implement a right-of-way between those two, almost identically to what's in figure 6.1?
I understand the intention there is for a connection to Shrubbery Grove to be delivered through Greenwalk Plantation.
Yeah, no, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested
that's
in.
what the green arrow shows, I believe.
And we can't be looking at the same thing. I'm looking at a page which has got 25 land is numbered 25, and it's on 27 of the reader.
I have that. I see a.
So there's so on the bottom, on the southwestern edge of the western parcel is a snaking green line.
Oh yes.
With an arrow at either end. And if I look at the key, I see the words proposed right of way.
And is it?
No, it's a solid line.
I think I see. I think I see what you're referring to.
Yep.
Yep.
So it says proposed right of way. Is that in the recreation mitigation strategy to put that in?
It doesn't form part of the east-west connection that's referred to in my evidence.
So we've got another map here where you're selling a connection and you're not, but that's not in the mitigation strategy. But sorry, it's not in your intention, your recreation mitigation strategy, but yet you're claiming the benefit of it in your proof of evidence as being the connection from Greenwalk Plantation, footpath 9 to Hertfordshire Bridleway 10.
I believe actually the intention is to link up to there's a green route shown. I'm trying to think, it's not best shown on this plan. It's shown on the I think it's the landscape plan contained within the recreation mitigation strategy, a landscape strategy plan.
Yeah.
Which shows this is on this is in my appendices DS3, appendix DS3.
I think we've got a big 20 in the top right corner, have we?
There's a big 20. Yes, yeah. Correct. And I think what that's showing, I haven't prepared this plan. It's been prepared by landscape colleagues, but it shows a connection to Greenwalk Plantation, starting more or less at the yellowy green asterisk in the west of the site, and then it continues along a green corridor, which is this tree-lined corridor going through the centre of the site, and it terminates at a purple circle on Barkway Road.
So why the right of way was very clever by your colleague that drew that map was because if the town council fence their Greenwalk Plantation because they're worried about people abusing it on bicycles, the right of way couldn't have been fenced. But they have every right, don't they, to fence across fence their property.
I don't know.
And if they have every right to fence their property, the delivery of your connection from Greenwalk Plantation to the Hertfordshire Way at Bridleway, Royston 10, would not be possible, would it?
If you're suggesting that the town council may fence off a Greenwalk Plantation public footpath, that would mean that a connection.
If the
Am I
footpath doesn't
understanding
run
it
on your land, they have every right to fence their land, and you would not be able to get to footpath 9.
If they were to fence it, then clearly not.
Okay.
Whether they've got
Thank
the
you.
right to put a fence across a.
I totally understand. And that's why your
can't
colleague, sorry, Dr. Stimpton, that's why your colleague was so clever when they said that they would put in a right of way, because clearly if there was a right of way proposed, then obviously there would be no possibility of fencing it. The right of way could not have been obstructed, but you've dropped that from your plans, as you've said. And so you're now relying.
I haven't produced a plan that shows what you're referring to.
You just told me that it was a matter that you were using a connection that was not the right of way.
There is a connection which isn't using the right of way along the southern boundary that you've referred to, which is the tree line.
Connection will not occur if the council, the Royston Town Council, not the district council, but Royston Town Council fence their land.
They'd have to fence across a public right of way.
No, they're not, though, are they? There's no public right of way there. You've agreed that the map and the text show that the public right of way doesn't enter the red line plan.
The public right of way through Greenwalk Plantation does.
It doesn't.
It's shown within the red line boundary on the plan we referred to earlier.
It doesn't. It's not. That's exactly what we agreed earlier.
It's the western section that doesn't sit within the red line. I think that's what we agreed.
Yeah, and it's that western section. Yeah, sorry.
We might be talking at cross purposes.
Yeah, sorry. I understand it now. The Greenwalk Plantation connection is at a point where it is very distant from the edge of the land you control. The only place it gets close to the land you control is in that western section that we're talking about. So if they fence their Greenwalk Plantation, the delivery of this east-west connectivity in Sang would not be possible.
As I say, this is a hypothetical situation, so it's quite difficult for me to.
Do you know what? I don't think it is that hypothetical. The council has just been elected. There's 13 councillors in the town. 12 of them have been elected from a single party, and most of them have been lined up in this room.
Can we get on with the question?
Yeah, saying that it's not going to happen. Were you here for those?
I'll be receiving legal submissions on the legal aspect of that. Thank you. Can we move on?
With the greatest respect to Mr. Hall, I've not had anyone say that they're going to defence, that they have the power to erect defence, or they're going to erect defence. No such evidence is before the inquiry. No one's given evidence to that effect that they're going to erect defence.
Yeah, and I
have legal power to erect defence.
I completely understand. What I'm trying to show is whether your commitment to Sang and your commitment to deliver things within the Thurfield Heath mitigation strategy are real, genuine, are committed to within your recreation mitigation plan and within the conditions and within your undertakings.
Questions now.
Yeah, of course. I think it's time to look at this financial contribution calculation. Mum, I can only apologise. This is going to be a slow, step-by-step maths job. But I will take it as slowly as possible, and I'll try to support this with the way this works within my as an appendix to my closing submission. Dr. Stimpson, your formula I thought was a great contribution to the knotty problem of the Thetford Heath mitigation strategy not really having a formula. So for that, in that point, I congratulate you for stating it. And if I was to,
Can we get on with questions,
yeah,
please?
the formula should, by its nature, concern a single same time period for both the costs and the forecasts, shouldn't it?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
The formula should consider costs and growth forecasts for the same time period, shouldn't it?
Not necessarily, because you can have mitigation measures that are implemented within a shorter timescale to the actual forecast growth.
Okay, so a one-off, for example, is a one-off.
Yeah.
But
otherwise, yes, I agree. The mitigation program should relate to the growth period.
yeah, it would be an error to have time of one thing being 20 years and time of the other being 10, for example.
I think I can agree with you.
Thank you. In table 6.1, so this is on page 25 of your statement of, proof of evidence. It generally relates to either one-off payments, which we can see by the type one-off, or recurring annual payments, which generally are for an 8-year period. Would you agree?
Yes, 8 to 10 years.
8 years for 4 of them. I can see it goes over the table. That's another one over the way. And then the lead warden you've got for 10 years.
Well, just to be clear, these timescales are taken directly from the mitigation strategy. They've not been altered by myself.
Yeah. Yeah, but what we're looking at here is how your formula works, and your formula needs to have, we've just agreed, the same time frame. So the fact that we've got here, we're employing a warden for 10 years. As time goes on, of course, there'll be another 10 years and another. It's about what these things cost over time. So I'd like us to decide an arbitrary timescale, which is the right one for us to use for this table. And I would suggest, simply for the ease of multiplication, we take 10 years. Would you be happy with that?
I don't know. I don't know until what you're about to say next, really, as to whether that's
so. I'm going to change the figures in this table slightly.
I mean,
I'm not going to change the total cost of the lead warden, because that's already 10 years. But the warden intern support role, I'm going to want to be 10 years rather than 8. So it's going to increase to £241,500.
I think the point.
Mr. Cox, sorry, can you ask a question? I don't understand what the question was.
I'm asking Dr. Stimpson whether he would mind me adjusting the timescales so that they're all the same at 10 years.
I think that the point is that the timescales relate to the local plan period, and the local plan going up to 2031. So that's the stop date. That's, as I understand it, that's been used in the mitigation strategy, and the start date appears to have been taken as either 2021 or 2023, which is more or less around the time the mitigation strategy was being formulated, and when items such as purchase of wardening equipment was anticipated to take place from.
So
I believe those are the.
So I take that as a no. I'll come back to your formula. For your formula to work, we've already agreed that you need to compare the total cost of the mitigation program for some arbitrary time period against the forecast growth generating recreation for some arbitrary time period. And then that can allow us to calculate the per dwelling tariff.
Yeah, agreed.
So would you mind if I do 10 years?
Let's see where this goes.
Yeah, let's see where it goes. So, madam, there is some adjustments that I am making in my copy of table 6.1, where the items that are currently for 8 years, I'm increasing them to 10.
I'll ask the questions, but I'm not going to be taking new evidence.
Yeah, this is not new evidence. This is it. If Dr. Stimson, do you want some time to work through that maths, or will you happily accept that that means that the total cost when put across 10 years is 695,450?
I'll happily take your word for that,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Hall.
We're going to return to these figures because we can actually improve them slightly better with some benefit of hindsight, but and that is already in my statement of case. But they're not that's not as important as that base, getting the 10 years right. Your theory next applies a 20% uplift, accepting the probability of uncosted and undercosted mitigation measures.
It does.
It does. And I'm happy to go for the same uplift for now. And that gives the cost across 10 years now, where you put 753.44 in 6.4.14. If we could work it through together, you'd get now to £834,540.
Okay.
So the next problem is to identify the forecast growth generating this recreational impact. And we've been to map 11 already. And map 11 is about the wider ZOI. And we agree that the map shows a body of developments, some of which are closer to the centre of Royston and some of which are further away. And I like your reference to paragraph 515 in the Thurfield Heath SSI mitigation strategy, which reads, more than 2,000 new homes are expected to be built over the period 2011 to 2031 within that part of the wider zone of influence that lies in North Hertfordshire. Do you agree that's what it says?
It does.
So what we're talking about is 2,000 homes within the Hertfordshire part of both the inner zone and the wider zone.
This is where we may depart.
Yeah, fair enough.
Opinion.
But you do agree that the map shows such developments in Royston?
The map shows a number of allocations. It's not. I don't think it shows 2,000 dwellings.
No, it doesn't. It shows a number of allocations, but some of them are within the 1.9 zone. You're nodding. I think that's acceptable.
We've agreed that.
So when I refer now to table 6.2 and the point that you've already predicted, I would expect the total figure on here not to be 3,800.
You're saying it should be 2,000.
I'm not even saying that.
Right.
Because there's another error we need to iron out, and that is that the total for 2,000 is across a 20-year period, the period 2011 to 2031. And the costs you've put forward, or we've agreed my numbers too, are across a 10-year period. So the total here is 1,000.
Not necessarily.
Explain.
We don't have the we don't have those sort of retrospective figures to understand.
No, we're using your number from 5.1 of the.
I've taken the figure of 2,000 dwellings from the projected housing growth, which is set out in the mitigation strategy.
Yeah, and that's what I read. 5.1.5. Let's
My
we go there.
reading, yeah, and my reading is that would.
It says more than 2,000 homes, new homes, are expected to be built over the period 2011 to 2031 within that part of the wider zone of influence that lies in North Hertfordshire. So it's not including the South Cambs part, but it is including the bit on map 11, which is the North Hertfordshire is indicated on map 11 with the squiggly line near Royston. So the number of dwellings in table 6.2 should have a total of 1,000. And you've, in your numbers, have identified the inner zone across 20 years as 1,800.
Yes.
So if we could almost correct the number of dwellings column in 6.2, it would read 900 inner zone, 100 in what is going to be the wider zone tariff, the outer zone, as I call it, the outer zone tariff.
I think you were suggesting 1,000, weren't you?
No, the total is 1,000. The wider zone is 900 plus 100, and it totals 1,000. 2,000 is the number to be built over the period 2011 to 2031 in the wider zone.
As I say, I don't believe it's clear that it would be a simple case of halving the figure. The local plan is drafted 2011 to 2031.
And that's the period that this is about, 2011 to 2031, 20 years.
But that's not to say that 2,000 homes would be built equally across that period of time.
Oh, okay.
And that's
Oh, okay.
That's my point.
Yeah, okay. I understand that. There may be a variation in some years. But for your formula to work, would you like me to go for the full 20 years? In which case, what we'll do is we'll double the costs numbers and we'll leave this at 2,000 with a total of 2,000, 1,800 in the inner and 200 in the outer.
This is your workings now.
Yeah, yeah. So as long as we're comparing apples with apples, if you want a 20-year baseline time frame, I think you've already understood, Dr. Simpson, that by crashing the number of dwellings total figure, it is going to, but keeping the total contribution figure similar, or in fact slightly up. If you remember, we agreed it could go up to 8,345,40. The only way that this table can then be computed is by changing the base tariff per dwelling.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, and I like the way you calculate the base tariff per dwelling, which Dr. Simpson does through between 6.4.18 and 6.4.20. So computing those numbers, the weighted dwellings are if you stay with my workings, but if we want to double it, we can always double it. It's a proportionate thing. It doesn't matter to what we multiply it by. But I've done 900 times 1.75 plus 100. So that means that the qualifying weighted dwellings number is 1,675. And that, using a 10-year cost base, gives a base tariff of £498.23 per dwelling. Do you understand that that is how we would calculate that using your formula?
Sorry, could you repeat that last part?
So I'm using your formula, your method between 6.418 and 6.420. So it's the number of inner zones, which I've put at 900 because we're going for 10 years, times 1.75, which was your method. And I've added to it the number in the outer zone, not in the inner zone, which is 100, to give 1675 as the total number of dwellings within the weighted number of dwellings within the wider zone. And then we use that to calculate the base tariff per dwelling. That's the one you've got here at 146.30. And by crunching the numbers, we arrive at 498.23.
Okay, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah. I appreciate it's very difficult to work this through. And if we then do the multiplication for the relative weighting, the weighted tariff per dwelling for the inner zone, which is calculated by taking that base tariff and multiplying it by 1.75, comes to a weighted tariff for the inner zone of £871.91. Shall we call it 872 per dwelling? Dr. Simpson, it's a long way between £256 per dwelling and 871.91 per dwelling, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. So I think what you and I ought to really do is sit down and work these maths through and really understand each other's position, because we have got here I've used your formula, which I like, and I've got us to £871.91 per dwelling. And that certainly doesn't make £350 per dwelling look like an appropriate amount. Would you agree?
Those are your words. There's obviously quite some difference between the figures.
There is,
and there's a difference in the basis that feeds into that formula. So whilst I think we have common ground on the formula being a reasonable approach to deriving the figure, I think it's the underlying assumptions which is where we differ.
So let's talk a little bit more about some of those assumptions and see whether I can persuade you to revise the 871.91 closer to £1,000 per dwelling. The first way of doing that is to look at that split that we took between the number of dwellings in the inner and the wider zone of influence. If you remember, I appreciate that you said that the 2000 might not be delivered in a linear 10 years, but we can use the 20-year figure if we have to. But I said it would be delivered in the ratio of 900 to 100. Your maths brain is already ahead of me, but I've looked at the figures within the Hertfordshire local plan and as they are in the Fairfield Heath mitigation strategy. And I think that 750 in the inner and 250 in the outer is actually a more realistic ratio. But I'm not hung up on it. The effect of changing the ratio from a high inner and low outer to a more even or a more even, still 750 to 250, would be to increase the inner zone's weighted tariff per dwelling. Do you understand that's how the math works?
I understand.
The second way we can improve this is by understanding what was agreed between Natural England and NHC in the very early days of paying out the Ivy Farm. As you'll see from my statement of case, which includes the receipts and what we claimed for from NHC, we stopped claiming for specific costs on equipment on an actuals basis because it was very time consuming administratively. And we started to use a percentage of full cost of staff to draw the money through. And this was agreed at 15% between NHC and Natural England, following some investigations by their staff into similar schemes. and 15% was felt to be fine.
I
So-
assume you're coming on to a question.
Yeah, I am. So would you 15%, Dr. Simpson, increases slightly the total contributions, and would you appreciate that would again lift the weighted tariff per dwelling figure?
I'm not sure I understand your point there.
Yeah, fair enough.
Unfortunately.
It is getting. I appreciate it's getting quite tough when we talk about it. There was a change to the way we were taking the money. We wanted to reduce our admin, and so we agreed a percentage uplift. And that
Right.
the net effect of that was that it started being calculated from full cost of staff rather than every time they bought a pen, we had to record it separately. So when we do those two changes that I've just talked about, we get to a tariff for the inner zone of £980 per dwelling. Dr. Simpson, I've gone through this maths exercise with you because I really think your formula's good, but I want you to realise that had you sat down with the Conservators, we would have walked this path together and have come to a good figure. Do you accept that what I've talked about is none of it's unreasonable?
As I say, I don't agree with some of the base assumptions there. In essence, we agree on the approach to calculating the figure, but it's really the distribution of the dwellings where we differ.
Yeah, and I'd love you to work it out at 20 years, and do that exercise, and maybe you could put the 20-year numbers in, and I'll put the 10-year numbers in. They're going to come to very similar numbers.
I mean, it's worth saying, I suppose, one of the difficulties is that, as you've identified there, the housing growth is across the local plan period, which is a 20-year period, and the mitigation measures is over a different time period, which is necessarily the case because the local plan period starts in 2011, which obviously precedes implementation of any mitigation. So we can't retrospectively look at a figure for the mitigation costs and make those time periods align. It's just not physically possible. So for the purposes of my evidence, I've simply used those figures as they appear directly within the mitigation strategy as the overall package of costs.
The numbers aren't really the cost figures aren't really, they are important. They get me a lot closer to 1,000, but even as they are, they get to 871 rather than 200 and 256. So 871, you'll agree, doesn't make 350 per dwelling look particularly attractive.
They're clearly very different figures.
Yeah. The emphasis in the Thurfield Heath mitigation strategy, and it's included in there, I wonder if you remember, it includes the mention that Natural England really want this to be in perpetuity.
They want the SANG measure to be in perpetuity.
And they also the SAMs, but they recognise that they can't go beyond the local plan.
So the mitigation strategy sets out that Natural England guidance, and it's worth saying that this typically applies to SSSIs in the wider context of those SSSIs underpinning European sites, such as SPAs and SACs. But their expectation would be for funding to be, as you say, in perpetuity, 80 plus years. The mitigation strategy sets out that, given the scale of proposed development that remains to be built, funding for that length of time is not achievable within the mitigation strategy. So it's realistic in its.
I'm going to find you the piece where it says that the aim was perpetuity, but they couldn't do it.
It's para 622 of the mitigation
brilliant,
strategy.
Brilliant.
Para 6.22 of where?
The mitigation strategy, ma'am.
Thurfield Heath
C5
mitigation strategy. I'm trying to find it. You got it there. It's page 56 of 81. It talks about the council acknowledges that Natural England would normally expect a post like this to be funded in perpetuity, which could be between 80 and 120 years. My understanding that's the Perpetuity Act that dictates that. However, given the scale of proposed development that remains to be built out, funding for the post that length of time, this is not achievable through this strategy. So that's why we've compressed the timeframes to be 10 or 20 years, whichever one you want to choose. That's excellent. So I'm really happy that we've got to a figure which is so different. So I'm going to come back to the SANG, and I want to talk to you about this SANG standard. Have you read the SANG standard that I included with my statement of case?
Are you referring to the SANG standard guidelines?
Yeah, so they were written by, I think, by
Natural England's.
No, there's our councils. They were a different council.
Oh, Bracknell Council.
Yes.
I've not referred to that. I think that's in relation to a European site.
No, that's a SANG standard. Shall we get it up? I can't remember which number that is.
It's
816 in the core document.
Sorry, 816 in the core documents.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's the one. So this is the guidelines for creation of SANG.
That is the Natural England guidance, I believe.
Okay, well,
August
we thought this was
2021.
published by Bracknell Council. So
No.
I'll accept that our misunderstanding. That's where we got it from. Brilliant. If it's Natural England, it's even better. The appendix, I think, is a document, is a point where I think we could just get into what SANG's about. In the appendix, which is page 6 on the reader, it says Appendix 1, Site Quality Checklist for SANG. When you look at the SANG that you've agreed with Natural England via the recreation mitigation strategy, does it meet these standards?
No, and there's a good reason for that, which is that this guidance you're referring to is primarily directed at strategic SANG sites, which are sites which are provided outside of development sites and serve to attract people away from sensitive designated sites. And those sites are typically funded through developer contributions. So that's distinct from the situation here, which is on-site SANG delivery as part of the development. And that's a distinction that's made in the mitigation strategy for Thurfield Heath, which is that, and why it refers to the FIT standards as the primary method of assessing the suitability of open space provision to address recreational issues rather than the SANG standards. The only exception to that, I suppose, is the reference to the area threshold, which it says should be used within the inner zone for developments occurring within the inner zone.
Yeah, cool. Okay, I stand
distinction.
better educated, Dr. Simpson. Thank you for that. But nonetheless, this is a set of SANG standards, and it talks about some of the issues and things that SANG should include, like it should include access points appropriate for the visitor use of the SANG.
It does. If you're intending to go through the list, I'm not sure it's the best use of inquiry time, because I'm simply going to refer back to the fact that this guidance isn't applicable to the Thurfield Heath mitigation strategy.
So the recreation mitigation strategy that you've written isn't intending to take people away from Thurfield Heath. It's just dealing with local people who live on your estate.
Well, it's primarily intended to service people from the new development, but given the level of over provision relative to both the SANG and the FIT standards, it's expected it will likely also draw residents from slightly further afield, so it will act at a more local scale as well.
But you haven't quantified that.
No. It's worth saying, and just to reiterate the point around that guidance, it's within CD 5.5, the mitigation strategy. It's paragraphs 5.3.16 to 5.3.17, which deals with this point. 5.3.16 is referring to, in some areas, SANG can be provided as strategic off-site solutions. And then it refers to the Natural England guidance, which is what you were just asking me to go through. Para 5.3.17 says strategic SANG provision is not being pursued in the first iteration of the mitigation strategy, as there is no evidence-based policy basis or allocated sites for this purpose in the new local plan. So that's just to make the distinction.
So my understanding is strategic SANG is where a number of developers would contribute to a site which is going to be dedicated for SANG.
Correct.
So, for example, well, I can think of some developments that have done that.
So those are typically large 30 hectare plus site that have got a larger catchment.
Yeah. But that doesn't mean that and that's not being pursued by this strategy. I understand that.
No.
But that doesn't mean that this SANG that you are providing on site needs to mitigate the cumulative recreational impact.
It needs to address the recreational impact of the development.
Okay.
You refer to cumulative there.
Yeah. Well, because I'm thinking of my accessible green state model diagram, which again is the Natural England one, that looks at the different sizes of green space and their range from the development, and says that people will go there. So, and I think we've agreed that this development is in the 1.9 zone, and I think we've agreed that means there's going to be 14 household trips per year from these very people. You're not mitigating those trips.
Well, it's following the FIT standards that are set out in the mitigation strategy, which are designed to address the visits from the households within the new development.
Within the new development.
Yeah.
You're just about the new development. You're not addressing the ones from outside the development.
Not in a direct way that perhaps you're referring to, but what I'm saying is the level of on-site provision significantly exceeds the standard set out in the mitigation strategy, and therefore is likely to have a wider draw beyond the development, and therefore will, in practice, likely function to draw other recreational visits that would otherwise land on Thurfield Heath.
And as we heard yesterday,
it's impossible to quantify that.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. And as we said yesterday, or Mr. Frisbee said yesterday, it's a rabbit warren of existing footpaths, the site at the moment. What about the people who are using it currently? Where are they going to go if they no longer like that built environment?
Well, there will be a significantly improved open space area. At present, you've got 2 fields of crops, which at certain times of year, yes, people can perhaps walk across, but at other times of year, those parts of the fields are not accessible to members of the public, and certainly the public rights of way do not pass across the site in a zigzag manner or crisscross manner. In contrast, the proposal, whilst obviously the built development will occupy part of those the existing fields, the remainder will be set out as an attractive mix of meadow grassland, including chalk grass and creation, new woodland planting, and other forms of naturalistic planting, as well as play areas and more formal parkland type habitats and landscape typologies.
You'll appreciate that the Conservatives know a thing about chalk grassland habitats.
Indeed.
How long do you think it's going to take to create the grassland habitat, the chalk grassland habitat you've just described?
Well, it would typically be within 10-15 year time period.
Thank you. I just wanted for us to understand, and we do agree that the sort of coming on stream of these wonderful habitats you're talking about is 15 years from the time you start doing it, which will be when it is. What you've described to me, Dr. Simpson, and I think we know we're not going to agree on it, is a SANG package that you can't really guarantee, and I
disagree with that.
Yeah, I realize, and a contribution where you've calculated your formula to be £247, and we've got it straight away to £871. Can we now look at the benchmark site? So if we could go to the Fairfield Heath mitigation strategy. Again, I think it's section 5, isn't it? Is it 4?
Oh.
Sorry, Carol, you're right.
Yeah.
This must be section 4. Sorry, it's 5.3.5. That's page 43 in both reader and sorry, it's page 44 I want to look at in both reader and document. And this is the case study. And the case study is for a number of homes very similar to the proposed appeal development. 279 in the case study, 280 is the development proposal. And there was an agreement to put in a significant amount of green infrastructure. So this is para 4 at 8 hectares per 1,000 population, based on an occupancy assumed of 2.4. Are those the same sort of figures that you're looking at in the development?
No, is a short answer. The longer answer is that we're looking at the same minimum standards.
Yeah.
But as I explained earlier, those are significantly exceeded by the appeal proposals.
Yeah. But what is it, hectares per 1,000 population? What's your number?
So the appeal proposals living over 10 hectares of on-site green infrastructure.
But it isn't really, is it? Whose land are you counting in your 10 hectares?
It's all of the green infrastructure that's like to be accessible,
including green walk plantation.
No, that's not included.
Okay, that's interesting. So can we go to some maps? Can we go to some maps so we can establish whether green walk plantation is part of it or not? In your your master plan document. So that's 2.2. There's a figure in here somewhere. There's a table, sorry, that that looks at these issues. I'm going to find it in a minute. I don't know how you guys manage to know your documents so well. I really don't.
So is this PDF page 19 of the master plan document?
Oh, the PDF.
Could be, yeah, 1943.
The plan we were
Yeah,
referring
that's
to earlier in the
brilliant.
context
That's
of
a
the
real
plant.
number.
But it's
17 again, 17 again. Ah, this is the one that we looked at earlier. Yeah, so on here, the proposed on-site total is not 10.71 as per your proof of evidence.
So the
Question.
Oh, sorry, does the
you want me to
bottom of that total, or to the bottom of that table equal the same number as in your proof of evidence?
no, so there are different numbers in my evidence.
Uh-huh.
The 10.71 hectares is the total quantum of green infrastructure, which is taken from the master plan document, PDF page 18,
So the next page in this document,
the previous page.
previous page, sorry.
That does include green walk plantation.
Okay, so that's brilliant. Thank you very
Yep.
much. So you're including in your 10.71 land that you don't control.
No, I'm not including that.
Oh, you're not?
I'm simply saying that that is the total
Of that
green
green
infrastructure
map.
provision
Yeah, yeah.
referred
Okay.
to in the parameters plan.
Yeah, okay. But you appreciate that that map shows green walk plantation included.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah.
However,
Where Bridleway comes in at.
could I finish my
Yeah,
answer,
please do.
On the following page, and
Yeah.
we're talking about SANG, which is the on-site green infrastructure provision. That does not show the green walk plantation as being included within the SANG area.
I completely agree.
Yeah,
So
just
the actual SANG figure is actually under 10 hectares.
I think the council refers to it as 10.13 hectares.
Again, and who knows why. But it's referred to in your master planning document at 9.95 hectares.
It's not my document, but in
Sorry,
the
the appellant
there is that.
document.
I think it's safe to conclude it's approximately 10 hectares. And
Yeah, I do. Well, you start there. You start there. Where the bridleway comes from Grange Bottom and goes out through the site before it heads towards Reed. The bridleway is not part of yours either, is it?
The woodland through which the bridleway passes,
Yeah,
is part of the.
but it's already open green. It's already accessible green space for people.
It is, but
Yeah.
it's being upgraded, as is the other green space elements that are being included, and that is permissible under the guidance.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because the guidance also, which I agreed you didn't want to look at, because you think it's about spas.
Well, it's about strategic SANG provision,
SANG.
which we're not.
It also talks about not putting the full hectareage towards a hectare figure if that is not genuinely nature space. So your playgrounds and your allotments are not actually SANG figures, are they?
Well, that's where we differ.
Hmm.
And that's where the mitigation strategy differs. So the Thurfield Heath mitigation strategy explicitly allows for play areas and more formal areas of open space to be counted towards the SANG area.
Yeah.
And that differs from the.
Tell me about the allotments. Are they going to be fenced?
Are they going to be fenced?
Yeah.
That would be a matter of detail.
Yeah. Okay.
So I don't know the answer to that.
I have an allotment in Royston, and the existing allotments are fenced. and if they weren't fenced, it wouldn't work. Okay, so and just hanging on this diagram on page 19. Yeah, is it the next one then? Yeah, 19. I note this is an illustrative picture rather than one that is currently on the ground. Would you agree?
It's illustrative in nature,
Yeah.
of course. Yes.
You've got an area to the south of the eastern parcel, which is marked as being existing woodland. Would you agree that that's currently a field, a wheat field?
That's identified as existing.
Yeah, that's right.
Are you talking about the sort of dark olive green section along the southern boundary of the eastern field?
Yes, that's right.
I think that's referring to the line of woodland plantation on that boundary, which does exist.
Yeah, that's actually outside your red line. So that's the thing that we can see going to a white image. It's okay. We'll point out some of these errors, but there are some errors. Now,
if I could just follow up on that, I suspect it may simply be reflecting the fact that you have got an oversailing canopy from that linear tree belt, wooded belt.
The inspector can, when she walks the route, will be able to see whether that's realistic.
I think, in essence, unfortunately, I think it undermines the argument that you might be trying to make, which is, I think again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you're trying to suggest that the level of green space provision, accessible green space provision, has been overestimated.
No, I wasn't actually. I'm just staggered that in your master plan document we have one map that shows a right of way, and it's been put in by somebody who's really clever because it would allow you to make that connection, and yet when you've used the master plan document, you've dropped it, and here's you've got somebody else who's created a map which isn't really very accurate.
Is there a question?
Yeah, no, he was asking me a question, and I appreciate I'm not skilled enough to parry that. I'd like to now talk to you about something that I think you say. I better ask you whether you do say it first. Do you think that the impact from the case study site on the triple SI is likely to be higher because of the proximity?
I do, in practice, yes.
So can you explain that?
So the case study referred to in the mitigation strategy is located at immediately opposite the triple SI, on the other side of Baldock Road. In fact, I think some of those dwellings actually overlook onto Fairfield Heath itself. So that's how close it is. And there's considerably less open space being provided, nearly half the quantum of open space compared to the appeal proposals. To my mind, it would be more logical that people from the Baldock Road scheme would be inclined to visit the Heath more frequently for their daily visits, because they don't have to drive there. They could access it on foot or through a very short drive.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay,
and it clearly provides a comparatively greater resource compared to what's provided within the development scheme.
So in the case study, if we could go back to that, which is on page 44 of the Fairfield mitigation strategy, we're not going to agree on the 8 hectares per 1,000 population, which is a very substantial green infrastructure on that site. And broadly similar to your own, but
sorry, could I just respond to that, because that's not my position.
The Natural England asked for greater than figure, and this is greater than that figure, and you're delivering greater than that figure.
It's an order of 5 hectares on the case study versus 10 hectares on the appeal site. The appeal site's providing almost double the level of SANG provision. So I don't consider those broadly comparable.
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't talking about the quanta. I was
Ah.
talking about the requirement, which was at 8 hectares per thousand.
Well,
You're delivering over 8 hectares per thousand, and so is this site. You'd agree?
yes, but
Yeah,
by
thank
quite
you.
a different.
Yeah. The open spaces here are interconnected and will provide a series of circular routes for dog walking, running, and cycling with children. This includes a perimeter walk of approximately 1 mile in length, as well as shorter loops designed to intersect, overlap with public rights of way that crosses the site. What we're talking about here is an area of SANG and its loops and its interaction with the rights of way network that are broadly similar to the types of things you are claiming for good SANG. Would you agree?
I don't think I would agree, and
Right.
I'd refer to the plan that illustrates, I think, what you've just described, which is just over the page.
Yeah, so the next page down.
On page 46
Yeah.
in the mitigation strategy. What that shows me in terms of the SANG provision is effectively green corridors along the southern, northwestern and northern boundary
Yeah.
of the site with a attenuation basin, and then the rest of the land is school area and development.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of green in between, in amongst the development. If you contrast that with the appeal scheme proposals, and as I say, that amounts to about 5 hectares of open space. If you contrast that with the appeal proposals, you've got much more significant area of open space, 10 hectares. It's not just green corridors along the boundaries. There are green corridors along the boundaries, but then you've got areas that open out into considerable meadow areas bound by woodland. That's a much different proposition, in my view, to what is shown.
Yeah, okay. I understand your differences. I think it's horses for courses. The point being that they have a circular route. They have this green stuff. They've even got a fitness trail. But coming back to that point where you thought that these people were more likely to use the heath, I can obviously accept that for some of these residents, their doorstep accessible green space is the heath. And yeah, we have an uphill battle to educate those people to avoid walking their dog every day where the ground nesting birds are. But what you don't seem to have understood is, and I'm going to ask you whether you do understand it. Sorry, I've got to get my question. If people walk from your development to the tennis club, how will they get there?
We don't know is the short answer.
Yeah, okay.
Because it will depend on the public rights of way that are in place at that point in time, some of which we've been discussing and debating. So we don't know. What we do know is there's a differential in terms of distance.
Yeah. If we could turn to my statement of case at CTHG A01. So that's not going to be in the core documents. It's going to be in one of the other bundles. We've done a Google walk. Yeah. From Grange Bottom, from number 84 Grange Bottom, which is one of those access points you've got. And we're trying to think about how to get to the heath. And we have people walking down Grange Bottom along to the gyratory where they cross the road. And then we have them walking along Sun Hill. And we have them getting to the heath at its eastern edge at a place called Sun Hill Common.
Sorry, where is this?
This is, yeah, sorry. It's in the appendix to my proof of evidence. Oh. Sorry, and for you, it's in the green folder. Sorry.
That was in your statement of case.
Appendix to the statement of case, it
Okay.
is, yes, you're correct. And this is page 33 in this one. It's on there. Yeah. They put the whole of ours up. Yeah, there you are.
Evidence. Opening statement, disagree.
No, it's not. It's another one though. What's it?
CTHG, which number?
A01. So it's page 33 of that appendix.
Okay. Yeah.
We're trying to find it for Dr. Simpson.
Page 33.
Yeah. Have you? Yeah. No, keep going down. Keep going. Keep going. No, somewhere in here.
Sorry,
Yeah.
could you give me the
I'm going to
CTHG
bring it to you
reference?
if I may. Pass it to you.
Yeah.
So this shows a route that we looked at and tried to find a short route between Grange Bottom and the Heath. And the route, as I was trying to describe, goes along Grange Bottom, pops out onto Barkway Road, goes down to the gyratory, probably uses the new crossing at the gyratory, and then walks up a slight hill to get onto Sun Hill itself, and walks west on Sun Hill, and meets the Heath at a place that's modernly known as Sun Hill Common. But it wouldn't go onto the Heath at that point. You would carry straight on along a road called Stakepiece Road, and you'd get to the gate at the Common, which it brings you out near the pumping station. You would then walk straight in a straight line. There's a path that takes you directly to the tennis club.
Okay.
The reason I asked you this question was because if you tried to walk to the tennis club from the Baldock Road site, you would walk along Baldock Road and cross Baldock Road at the tennis club. So from your site, a typical recreation journey, not one that's in our visitor study because these people are going to play tennis, you'd understand that would involve crossing the Triple SI.
Yep.
So the amount of impact caused by your site is greater because each time somebody wants to go to the tennis club on foot, they're likely to cross the Triple SI, if my route is a reasonable route.
Well, that's what we don't know. Whether that is
I live there, so I'm trying to suggest to you that if you walked it, you would find that one of the flatter and most enjoyable routes to walk. You've not got too much traffic for some of it. What about the rugby club? Shall we talk about where you would walk to get to the rugby club?
It's not something I have any evidence on. So
okay. So the rugby club is also on the Heath, like the tennis club, and you would walk a very similar route, as is the football, as is the archery, as is Royston Runners, as is the Wednesday Health Walk, which is a massively popular health event. The point I'm trying to get to, Dr. Simpson, is your proof of evidence supposes that simply because it's closer, the impact on the Triple SI will be greater. Whereas in fact, it's where you're located in reference to all of these facilities that actually drives the amount of footfall. So your figures for your 14 people, the 14 family visits per year, is actually going to be dramatically increased by the number of times people from your development cross the heath. Do you understand that?
I think I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, good.
My response to that is that the mitigation strategy is intending to address recreational visits for excluding those activities you've just mentioned, such as use of the sports facilities, and it's intended to address those daily visits for dog walking, jogging, and so on. That's what the mitigation strategy is addressing. Those activities you've just described are expressly out with that mitigation strategy, and so
no, they're not out with the mitigation strategy. They're out with the visitor survey.
Yes,
but they're not out with the mitigation strategy. The mitigation strategy is trying to remove recreational pressure.
But the intention of the on-site SANG provision within the appeal proposals is to divert those daily or weekly dog walking and walking visits. That is what that's designed to absorb. And in that respect,
so if I could just repeat that back to you, am I correct in thinking that the SANG provision is not going to deal with the type of journey that I've just talked about, going to sports clubs?
It's not intended to address that type of activity. It's intended to address the
thank you.
The core activities which are seen as leading to recreational disturbance on the heath, which are those, as I described, dog walking and jogging activities. Those will clearly be provided in an attractive means within the development proposal, as opposed to people having to walk 15 minutes to the heath, whereas it's on the doorstep of the new development. That is likely to be an effective mechanism for absorbing a good proportion of those recreational visits that would otherwise occur on the heath.
But the objective of the SANG that you've agreed with Natural England is not to reduce the pressure by people walking to the sports clubs.
Not expressly, no.
Thank you. It's been most helpful for me to understand where you're coming from. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is that your cross-examination?
That's me done. Thank you.
So, thank you. Can we have a short adjournment before we continue to examination in chief, please? So it's 3:59. We'll continue at 3:45. Thank you. The inquiry is adjourned. It's 3:45. The inquiry is resumed. You ready? Before I invite Mr. Chung for re-examination, I have a question. Yes. There seemed to be an area of difference between yourself and Mr. Hall regarding the inner and wider zone of influence. Are there definitions set out anywhere?
Within the mitigation strategy itself. Bear with me, I should have the key. It's chapter 3, CD 5.5, which describes the zones of influence. The specific reference to 1.9 kilometres and 5.8 is found at paragraph 2.2.5 of that mitigation strategy, CD 5.5. 2.5. Those are the identified zones of influence.
So in terms of whether the wider zone includes the inner zone, where is that set out?
Well, yeah, yes, Mum, we were discussing map 11 in that same document. So in the text, it's not set out implicitly that one includes the other, whereas the map 11 that we're referring to, which only refers to the wider zone in the key, but it does yet include that inner zone.
Okay. Okay. Yep. Mr. Chung.
Good afternoon, Dr. Simpson. You were asked some questions about the connectivity and what's being proposed in order to improve east-west connectivity. So if you have a look at your proof of evidence at 6.32, you reference there paragraph 5.512 of the Thurfield Heath mitigation strategy. And that tells us that there's a footpath run broadly northwest to southeast, linking from adjoining residential areas, providing access into the wider countryside towards Royston. To the west of the further footpath, known locally as Plantation Walk, runs from close to town centre before doglegging west to the A10. There's an absence of east-west connectivity. And is that what the Thurfield mitigation strategy is seeking as a positive measure, some east-west connectivity? Have I got that right?
It is, yes. It's serving to address that specific strategic mitigation measure that's identified in the mitigation strategy.
And that plan we see then immediately after the text is taken from the Thurfield mitigation strategy. I see that from the caption underneath.
It is, yes.
And it's showing that the red arrow presumably is where they want the connectivity to take place.
Yes, presumably.
And is that what's proposed as part of the master plan and part of your strategy? Will it be possible in future, if this development goes ahead, for someone to roughly walk across the the line of that red arrow.
Yes.
Is there anything currently on site to prevent people from taking that route and then picking up the Green Walk plantation?
There's no official public right of way along that part of the boundary, and at certain times of year there may also be crops, but beyond that there's nothing. There's no physical barriers per se.
Yeah. And if we look at the master plan document that you were taken to, CD 2.2, page 17. So that shows the east-west connectivity, doesn't it, to the point of where the Shrubbery Grove exit is, isn't it?
Yes, it does.
And we see that the red line of the site joins the purple line of the public right of way, doesn't it?
It does. Yes, they appear to sit side by side.
Now, if the inspector were to grant planning permission and this east-west route were provided, would it be in keeping with the Thurfield mitigation strategy for the town council, assuming that they got the legal right to do this, which is a big question we can come back to in closing submissions, would it be in keeping with the Thurfield mitigation strategy for the town council to say, you know something, we're going to block this route, we're going to build a fence along the in between the red line and the purple line?
No, it'd be contrary to mitigation strategy.
Yeah. Would it serve any purpose for anyone to come along and build a fence there? Any meaningful, useful, social purpose?
Not that I can envisage. No.
You were then asked some questions about your formula. And as I understand it, you didn't necessarily accept Mr. Hall's approach to the numbers. But let's just, for the sake of argument, let's just do the numbers again. Taking on board Mr. Hall's point, well, Dr. Simpson, what you've done is you've told us what it's going to cost over a 10-year period, but the housing that's going to bring the contribution forward will happen over a 20-year period. That appeared to be the answer.
Yes.
So if we look at your table 6.1, there are some one-off costs and there are some recurring costs. Yeah.
Yes.
So if we were to take away the one-off costs from the figure of 627, you end up, on my maths, tell me if I'm right, with 575. 575,320.
That looks right.
Yeah. You then take the 627, which is the first 10 years, and you add 575,320 for the next 10 years. Yeah? Because the one-off costs won't be required for the next 10 years. That's my logic.
Okay.
Is that something that works in terms of the way you've approached it?
That I can follow the logic.
Yeah. That gives you a figure of £1,203,190. £1,203,190. You've then applied a 20% uplift. Yeah.
Yep.
That's you a figure of £1,443,828 is what you would need over a 20-year period now. Yeah. If each house that came forward, if we go back to your table 6.2, 3,800 houses coming forward. If you times that by £350, you get to 1,330,000. Yeah.
Okay.
So the shortfall on Mr. Hall's logic of around about £100,000. Now, the 3,800 dwellings you've taken that, as I understand it, from the current plan, haven't you? Is that right?
Yes.
Your 64.16 new local plan, more than 1,800 new homes are anticipated built in and around Royston. Yeah, more than 2,000 expected built over the planned period, 2011, 2031. Is that the current plan?
Yes.
I'll get Mrs. Els to address the inspector on the number of houses that will come forward under the new standard method. But am I right in thinking this is all based on the 3,800 that's the number of houses coming forward because that's what the plan says and not a single house more?
Yes.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chung. So that concludes today's session. Thank you, Dr. Simpson. I shall adjourn today and we shall resume tomorrow at 10 a.m. The inquiry is adjourned. Thank you.